Help me reach 1,000 subscribes. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I read every comment. Thanks. I didn't think a joke could end a marriage. That sounds dramatic, I know. But that's where my story starts. My name is Elizabeth, and for a long time, I believed humor could soften anything. I believed love was resilient, forgiving, elastic. I believed wrong, and I learned that on an ordinary night, I still replay in my mind endlessly. James and I had been married 9 years. We weren't loud lovers or dramatic fighters. We were steady, predictable, functional. James worked logistics, long hours, clean shirts, quiet pride. I managed events, schedules, people. Life became routines, shared calendars, early nights. I didn't feel unhappy. I felt safe, which I assumed meant fulfilled at the time, without questioning the silences, the distance, or the things we stopped saying aloud anymore. The night it happened was casual, almost forgettable. We were in the kitchen after dinner, plates still warm in the sink. James mentioned feeling tired lately, weaker than usual, like stress was catching up. Without thinking, without malice, I laughed and said something cruelly careless, framing it as humor, a joke about him not being as strong as he used to be. I thought teasing was harmless, forgetting how words can bruise pride, dignity, trust, and love quietly over time. James didn't laugh. He didn't argue either. He just looked at me, really looked, like he was seeing something new and disappointing. I rolled my eyes, told him not to be so sensitive, that it was just a joke. The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. His jaw tightened, and I could almost hear something internal clicking into place. In that moment, the room felt smaller, colder, charged with seriousness I wasn't ready to acknowledge, dismiss, or take back despite the obvious hurt spreading across his face silently. He walked past me, went to the bedroom, and returned with a small duffel bag. I laughed again, awkward this time, asking what he was doing. James didn't answer. He folded clothes carefully, like this was planned, like he'd rehearsed it in his head before. I followed him, irritation rising, telling him he was overreacting. That joke shouldn't end relationships. That marriage meant thicker skin. My words kept coming, sharp, defensive, and completely unaware of the damage already done between us. Damage that couldn't be laughed away, softened, or corrected once respect had been publicly wounded. Even briefly, even once. At the door, James finally spoke. His voice was calm, which scared me more than anger. He said, quietly, that strength wasn't just physical, and weakness wasn't something to joke about with someone who trusted you. He said he felt small in his own home. Then he picked up his keys. I realized too late this wasn't performance or threat. He was done with explaining, negotiating, or proving himself anymore, because something essential between us had snapped, quietly, decisively, without drama, witnesses, or second chances left to give. When the door closed, the house sounded different. Louder, emptier. I stood there replaying my joke, telling myself he'd cool off and come back. If this moment feels familiar to you, tap like so this story can reach others who've lived it too. I didn't cry yet. I felt embarrassed, defensive, misunderstood. I still believed he was a problem. Not me, not us, not the quiet fractures forming long before. I texted him later, apologizing halfway, blaming stress the rest. No reply. Hours passed. Then night, I lay awake realizing jokes reveal what respect hides. Comment below if you think humor ever justifies crossing emotional boundaries in marriage. I kept waiting for my phone to buzz, for him to soften. It never did. Something irreversible had begun, and I could feel it settling into my chest, heavy, undeniable, final, real. By morning, his side of the closet was empty. The joke echoed louder than his absence. If you believe words can end relationships, type respect in the comments. I finally understood what I'd mocked wasn't weakness. It was vulnerability, and I had treated it casually. That was the last moment I saw myself as innocent in what followed, because consequences were already moving toward me. Quietly, deliberately, without mercy. Pause. 3 days passed without a word from James. Not a call, not a text, not even a passive-aggressive emoji. The silence felt intentional, like a boundary I wasn't invited to cross. I told myself he needed space, but deep down I knew this was different. Space implies return. This felt like closure unfolding slowly, deliberately, with purpose. I tried to stay busy. I reorganized the kitchen, answered emails late, replayed the moment again and again, editing it in my head. If I hadn't laughed, if I'd apologized properly, if I'd noticed how often James swallowed things instead of expressing them, that joke wasn't spontaneous. It was careless familiarity, the kind that grows when you assume someone will always stay, no matter how you speak to them. On the fourth night, I got a message, not from James, but from his sister, Claire. She asked if he was okay. That question landed harder than anything else. I replied honestly, saying I didn't know where he was, that we'd had an argument. She didn't respond. 10 minutes later, James finally texted. One sentence. I'm safe. I just needed to breathe. We met a week later at a quiet cafe near the river, neutral ground. He looked different. Not broken. Lighter. That scared me. We talked like adults, calmly, politely, like co-workers closing project. James explained something I hadn't let myself hear before. That my joke wasn't the cause. It was a confirmation. Confirmation that he'd been shrinking himself to fit my comfort, my humor, my dismissiveness. He said he'd spent years proving strength through patience, stability, silence. And that night, when I laughed, he realized none of it mattered. I cried then, not loudly, just tears I couldn't stop. I told him I loved him. He nodded gently and said love without respect feels like obligation. That line ended us more cleanly than any fight ever could. If this story moved you, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear how small moments carry big consequences. I watched him stand up, wished him well, and understood this wasn't abandonment. It was self-preservation. The divorce wasn't dramatic. No lawyers shouting. No assets fought over. Just signatures and quiet goodbyes. Friends took sides quietly. Some said James was too sensitive. Others said I'd cross a line. I stopped explaining myself. Explanations don't heal what awareness comes too late to save. Living alone forced reflection. I noticed how often I used humor to deflect discomfort, how often I joked instead of listening, how easily I dismissed emotional honesty when it inconvenienced me. Months later, I heard James had started therapy, started lifting again, started dating someone kind. The envy surprised me, not because he moved on, but because he did so without bitterness. That's when I understood the real lesson. Weakness isn't being tired, stressed, or vulnerable. Weakness is mocking someone's openness and calling it humor. Strength is leaving before resentment turns you into someone you don't recognize anymore. I don't hate James. I respect him more now than I did when he was my husband. Losing him taught me something I couldn't have learned while feeling comfortable. Words don't need volume to cause damage. Jokes reveal values. And love, real love, requires care even when things feel familiar and safe. Do you think James was right to leave over a single comment? Or should marriage survive moments like this? Share your perspective in the comments, and let's discuss it respectfully. I still think about that night sometimes, not with shame, but with clarity. It reminds me that people don't leave suddenly. They leave after being unseen for too long. If there's anything I'd say to the person I was then, it's this. Don't test love by how much it tolerates. Test it by how gently you handle what's offered to you in trust. Because once respect is broken, apologies arrive late, and jokes lose their innocence forever. If you found value in this story, like the video, comment with your honest takeaway, and subscribe for more real stories that explore relationships, choices, and consequences. Because understanding them early can change everything.